My daughter told me the sad prince at the park needed a hug, and her intuition saved a young billionaire from his darkest moment. The Tuesday that changed everything. Honestly, if you had told me last Tuesday morning that my 6-year-old daughter's stubbornness would end up saving a billionaire from the worst day of his life, I would have laughed in your face. I was too busy trying to stretch $20 until Friday and nursing a migraine that felt like a freight train. We almost didn't go to the park that day. It was overcast, miserable, and I was exhausted from a double shift at the diner. But Lily begged. She has this way of looking at you with huge, earnest eyes that make saying no feel like kicking a puppy. So against my better judgment, we stopped at the rundown playground near our apartment complex for just 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes turned into the most intense, terrifying, and beautiful hour of my life. It was a collision of two completely different worlds. My world of surviving paycheck to paycheck, and a world of unimaginable wealth that was crumbling under its own weight. And the bridge between those worlds was a little girl in a faded pink puffer jacket who saw something nobody else did. The weight of the world on a Tuesday. The park was empty, which wasn't surprising given the cold drizzle. I sat on a peeling green bench, mentally calculating if I had enough gas in the tank to get Lily to school the rest of the week. Lily, unbothered by the weather, immediately ran for the swings. I was scrolling through my phone, avoiding overdue bill notifications, just zoning out. I was in survival mode, a state I'd been living in since Lily's dad took off 3 years ago. My radar was tuned only to immediate threats: hungry kid, angry landlord, broken car. I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for anything else. I remember shivering, pulling my thin coat tighter. I called out to Lily that it was time to go almost as soon as we arrived. I was irritable. I just wanted to go home, make boxed macaroni, and crawl into bed. I wasn't looking for a miracle. I wasn't looking for drama. I just wanted the day to end. The sad prince on the bench. "Mommy, look." Lily had stopped swinging and was pointing toward the far end of the park, near a cluster of dense oak trees. I squinted. "What is it, honey? Come on, let's go." "No, look at the prince. He's broken." I followed her finger. Sitting on a bench tucked away in the shadows was a man. Even from a distance, he looked out of place in our gritty neighborhood park. He was wearing a long, dark wool coat that probably cost more than my car. His posture was what struck me, though. He was hunched over, elbows on his knees, head buried entirely in his hands. He looked like a statue erected to commemorate total defeat. "He's not a prince, Lily," I snapped, my patience fraying. "He's just a man with a headache, like Mommy, let's go." I tried to grab her hand, but she wriggled away. Lily has always been, I don't know how to explain it, too open. She feels things other people ignore. She senses the emotional temperature of a room the second she walks in. It's exhausted me for years, but it's also her superpower. The battle of wills. "He needs a hug," Lily announced, her voice profoundly serious. My stomach dropped. Stranger danger is burned into her brain, but her empathy was overriding her training. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice getting sharp. "Lily, we do not bother strangers, especially men sitting alone in parks. He wants to be left alone." "No, he doesn't," she insisted, looking back at me with those unnerving, knowing eyes. "His heart is hurting, I can hear it." It sounds cheesy typing it out now, but in that gray, damp park, it sent a chill down my spine. I looked back at the man. He hadn't moved a muscle. He was so still it was alarming. I was torn between protective maternal instinct and the strange conviction in my daughter's voice. I was terrified he might be dangerous, maybe on drugs, maybe unstable. But I was also looking at a fellow human being who appeared to be at the absolute end of his rope. Before I could physically stop her, Lily took 2 decisive steps toward him. "Lily, stop right now," I hissed, trying to keep my voice down so the man wouldn't hear. She ignored me. She just kept walking, slowly, deliberately, toward the figure hunched in the shadows. The collision. The man gasped. It was a ragged, wet sound like he hadn't breathed in minutes. His head snapped up. I saw his face, and my fear instantly evaporated, replaced by a wave of crushing pity. He was devastatingly handsome, The kind of face you see on magazine covers, but it was wrecked. His eyes were bloodshot and wild, tear tracks cutting through the perfect stubble on his cheeks. He looked terrified, lost, and incredibly young. He stared at Lily like she was an hallucination. He didn't speak. He just stared, his chest heaving. Then Lily did the thing that changed everything. She stepped between his knees, wrapped her little arms as far as they would go around his torso, and buried her face in his expensive coat. The man froze. His hands hovered nervously over her back, like he'd never been hugged before and didn't know the mechanics of it. I watched as the tension slowly began to leave his shoulders. And then he broke. It wasn't a gentle cry. It was a guttural, silent sob that shook his entire body. He collapsed forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Lily, burying his face in the small hood of her pink puffer jacket. The silent confession. I stood there, frozen, tears pricking my own eyes. I felt like an intruder on a sacred moment. I slowly walked over and sat on the other end of the bench, giving them space but letting him know I was there. They stayed like that for what felt like 5 minutes. Just a rich stranger clinging to my 6-year-old like a life raft in the middle of a muddy park. Eventually, the shaking stopped. He slowly pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve, looking utterly ashamed. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice wrecked. He wouldn't look at me, he was only looking at Lily. I don't know what happened, I couldn't breathe. It's because your heart was too heavy, Lily said matter-of-factly, still holding his hand. He let out a shaky laugh that sounded like a sob. Yeah, I guess it was. He looked up at me then, his eyes raw. I buried my grandfather this morning. He raised me, and now it's all on me. The company, the legacy, everyone's jobs. I was just sitting here thinking there was only one way to make the noise stop. He didn't have to say what that one way was. I knew. I'd felt that pressure before, albeit on a much smaller financial scale. The look in his eyes was one I recognized from the mirror on my darkest days. The juice box offering. We sat in silence for a bit. The rain started coming down harder. You're the prince of the city, aren't you? Lily asked. He managed a weak smile. Something like that, though I don't feel very princely right now. I realized then who he might be. There had been news about the passing of old man Sterling, the real estate mogul who practically owned half the downtown skyline. This must be the grandson, Julian Sterling, the heir apparent, the guy whose net worth was probably higher than the GDP of some small countries. And here he was, shivering on a park bench next to me, a waitress with $18 in her checking account. I dug into my oversized purse. It's not much, I said, pulling out a slightly squished grape juice box and a granola bar I'd saved for Lily's emergency snack. But sugar helps with the shock. He looked at the juice box like it was a diamond. He took it with shaking hands. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with genuine gratitude. He poked the little straw in and took a sip, a billionaire drinking a 50-cent juice box in the rain. It was absurd. It was profound. The departure. We couldn't stay there forever. The light was fading, and the cold was seeping into our bones. We have to go, I said softly. Julian nodded. He seemed to be slowly returning to his body, the panic receding behind a mask of weary resolve. He stood up when we did. He looked down at Lily. You saved me today, little one, he said. He wasn't being condescending. He meant it literally. Lily just shrugged. Everybody needs hugs, even princes. He looked at me, and for a second the enormous gap in our social standing disappeared. We were just two tired adults trying to survive. Thank you for sharing her with me for a minute, he said. You have no idea. Keep your head up, I said stupidly. What do you say to a guy like that? He turned and walked toward the street where, I assumed, a driver was frantically looking for him. We watched him go until he disappeared past the tree line. The revelation. The drive home was quiet. Lily fell asleep instantly. I was buzzing with adrenaline. Had that really just happened? I spent the next few days glued to the news. Sure enough, Julian Sterling had briefly gone missing after his grandfather's funeral services. causing a minor panic in the business world before reappearing that evening to give a flawless, strong statement to the press. I watched him on TV, looking impossibly poised in an Italian suit, talking about legacy and strength. Nobody knew that just hours before that speech, he was sobbing into a 6-year-old's puffer jacket in a muddy playground. I thought that was the end of it, a weird, intense memory to keep. Then, yesterday morning, there was a knock on my door. It was a courier. He handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope. There was no return address, just my name typed formally. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside wasn't a check. It wasn't a job offer. It was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock and a small velvet jewelry box. The prince's gift. The note read, "Sarah and Lily, there are no words for what you did for me in the park. When I sat on that bench, I truly believed I had nothing left to give the world, and that the world had nothing left for me. Lily's intuition pulled me back from an edge I don't think I could have returned from. You reminded me that connection is real, and kindness still exists outside of boardrooms and transactions. Lily was right. I was a very sad prince. I'm trying to be a better one now. Please accept this small token for Lily, something to remind her that her instincts are magic. Forever in your debt, J.S." I opened the velvet box. Inside was a tiny, delicate charm bracelet made of platinum. It had one charm on it, a tiny, intricately detailed crown with a small, pink sapphire heart at its center. I started crying right there in my cramped kitchen, not because of the monetary value of the gift, though I'm sure it costs more than my rent for a year, but because he had truly seen her. He had validated the very thing about my daughter that the world usually tries to crush, her boundless, irrational, beautiful heart. The morality of a moment. We haven't heard from him again, and I don't expect to. We don't belong in his world, and he doesn't belong in ours. But I look at Lily differently now. When she insists on stopping to pet a stray cat or smiles at the grumpy cashier at the grocery store, I don't rush her anymore. The world tells us that power looks like wealth, status, and stoicism. It tells us that billionaires are untouchable gods. But last Tuesday, in a cold, wet park, I learned that's a lie. We are all just terrified humans carrying burdens that feel too heavy to bear. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in a bank account. Sometimes it's in the intuitive bravery of a 6-year-old girl who knows that even princes need permission to break down, just so they can be put back together again with a hug and a grape juice box. Kindness is the only currency that truly matters, and thank God my daughter is rich in it.